Do you ever feel like your mind just won't shut up? Not in a poetic, deep thinker kind of way. I mean the kind of overthinking that keeps you lying awake at 3 a.m., jaw clenched, chest tight, stomach in knots, replaying the same conversation, the same mistake, the same damn scenario, over and over. You rehearse arguments that might never happen. You obsess over what you should have said. You try to solve the future like it's a math problem. Meanwhile, your life is on pause. You're not analyzing, you're drowning. And here's the truth you don't want to hear. You're not thinking, you're avoiding. Overthinking isn't wisdom. It's fear wearing a mask of intelligence. You're trying to control what you're too afraid to feel. And every time you go back into your head, you leave your body behind. Your gut clenches, your shoulders tighten, your breath gets shallow. You call it figuring things out. But what you're really doing is betraying yourself. Because the more you try to predict life, the less you actually live it. But here's the shift. What if I told you there are 3 simple science-backed practices you can use daily to stop this mental loop before it hijacks your peace? Not motivational fluff, not just be positive. I'm talking real tools based on neuroscience, psychology, and ancient wisdom. Practices that speak directly to your nervous system, your habits, and your subconscious. In this video, you'll learn how to interrupt the spiral, not by thinking better, but by breaking the addiction to thought itself. You'll learn how to calm your brain by using your body, and how to take back control, not through force, but through awareness. But this only works if you're willing to hear this. Overthinking is not your personality. It's your protection mechanism, and it's keeping you stuck. Are you ready to let go of the lie that more thinking means more control? Let's break the loop. Right now, you think you're being cautious, smart, responsible. But here's what's really happening. Your brain is hijacking your peace in the name of safety. Overthinking feels like a high-functioning habit, but neurologically, it's a stress response. Your brain doesn't want clarity, it wants certainty. And since it can't guarantee outcomes, it keeps you stuck in loops of analysis, hoping that if you just think long enough, you'll finally feel safe. But safety never comes, because your brain isn't designed to give you peace. It's designed to keep you alive. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman broke this down with 2 mental systems. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and emotional. System 2 is slow, rational, deliberate. And when your nervous system feels threatened, emotionally or socially, System 2 kicks into overdrive trying to fix the discomfort. You call it problem solving, but it's really fear disguised as logic. And it shows up in the body before it hits the mind. Tight chest, racing thoughts, shallow breathing. Your brain senses something might go wrong, so it builds an entire movie in your head, scene by scene, just to avoid the unknown. But here's the brutal truth. Overthinking doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. It convinces you that thinking more will eventually make you feel less. But all it does is exhaust you. This is why you're tired, not from doing too much, but from mentally living 1,000 futures that never happen. Andrew Huberman explains this with the concept of interoceptive mismatch. When your body signals stress, and your brain tries to solve it with thought, it creates a disconnect, a loop that feeds itself. So what you're really experiencing isn't deep insight. It's your body screaming danger, and your brain trying to outthink biology. But it can't. Not sustainably. You don't break free from overthinking by thinking better. You break free by understanding what triggers the loop, and interrupting it early. And this leads us to the next trap. You believe your thoughts are helping you solve the problem. But what if the very act of thinking is reinforcing the fear? What if your analysis is the real enemy? You've been told that thinking things through is a sign of maturity, that analyzing every detail means you're careful, smart, responsible. But here's what's really happening. Your mind is using analysis as avoidance, and your brain rewards you for it. Every time you overanalyze a problem instead of acting, your mind gets a hit of temporary relief, a false sense of, I'm doing something. That's how behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner explained it. Behavior that reduces discomfort even briefly gets reinforced. So instead of solving the issue, you end up solving your anxiety about the issue. You don't move forward. You just feel slightly better about being stuck. This is the core of what makes overthinking so seductive. It gives the illusion of progress while deepening the paralysis. Your mind loops through the same scenarios, thinking that more data will lead to more certainty. But real life doesn't work like that. In fact, studies show that past a certain point, more thinking leads to worse decisions. It's called analysis paralysis, and it's a real neurological loop. Too many options, too much pressure, and your brain goes into freeze mode. You start to second-guess your instincts. You rehearse outcomes instead of taking action. You postpone, prepare, reframe, until time runs out and nothing happens. And the worst part? Your body knows it. You feel the heavy pressure behind your eyes. Your jaw clenches without you noticing. There's a subtle nausea, like your stomach's tired of waiting for you to move. But here's the brutal truth. Thinking too much about a problem reinforces the belief that something's wrong, even if nothing is. Every loop convinces your nervous system that this situation is unsafe, and your brain listens. So it stays in the loop, not to help you, but to protect you from imagined threats. And this protection becomes a prison. Overthinking trains your brain to fear mistakes more than stagnation, to seek perfect answers instead of real outcomes. But clarity doesn't come from more thought. Clarity comes from interaction with life. And this brings us to something most people never consider. Your thoughts may not be guiding you. They may be trapping you in a problem that doesn't even exist anymore. Next, we'll break that illusion. Because the root of overthinking is deeper than logic. It's your relationship with time itself. If overthinking is the loop, then time is the trap that keeps you running in circles. Because what you're really doing is trying to resolve a future that hasn't happened with logic, pulled from a past that no longer exists. That's not clarity. That's cognitive limbo. And this is where it gets brutal. Your mind doesn't live in the present. It bounces between what went wrong and what could go wrong. Your body's in the room, but your thoughts are stuck somewhere between regret and rehearsal. Alan Watts once said, "The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as tomorrow." But your brain disagrees. It treats tomorrow like a threat that must be neutralized. So what does it do? It creates mental time travel. It replays that one mistake from 3 years ago. It simulates 5 worst-case scenarios for a decision you haven't even made. And while your inner world spirals, your actual life just sits, untouched. This is why you feel drained, not from what you've done, but from everywhere your mind has gone. You feel it in your nervous system, the tight throat, the racing pulse, that buzzing sensation in your limbs. That's not anxiety about now. That's your body reacting to a reality your mind invented. And the scary part, your nervous system doesn't know the difference. It responds to imagined fear the same way it does to real danger. So every time you think about what might happen, your body flinches, as if it already is. And this becomes your baseline. Mentally exhausted, emotionally hypervigilant, physically disconnected. Here's the paradox. You overthink to feel more in control. But the more you think, the more time you spend out of control, living in places that don't exist. And this is where the shift begins. You don't need more thought. You need more presence. Not as a concept, as a practice. The mind can't calm itself with more thinking. It has to be grounded in the now. And that doesn't happen through logic. It happens through sensation. You can't think your way out of overthinking. That's where most people get stuck, trying to fix mental overload with more mental effort. But the brain doesn't calm itself with logic. It calms through chemistry. And this is where neuroscience meets real life. According to Dr. Andrew Huberman, your mind is tightly wired to your body's state. The loop of overthinking is not just mental, it's physiological. If your nervous system is in a state of hyperarousal, your thoughts will match it. So instead of fighting your thoughts, you interrupt the signal with your body. Let's make this real. Here are 3 neurochemical switches you can flip anytime to break the mental spiral and rewire your emotional state. 1. Visual anchoring. Engage the horizon. When your eyes are darting, scanning, or fixated on a screen, your brain perceives threat. It thinks you're in danger. But when you gaze at the horizon, literally look far away, with soft, stable vision, your nervous system interprets it as safety. Cortisol drops. Your mind slows down. It's primitive. It's powerful. It works. 2. Physiological. Sigh. Reset your breath. This isn't just take a deep breath. It's a specific pattern. 2 quick inhales through the nose, 1 slow exhale through the mouth. Huberman calls this the fastest way to reduce stress immediately. It activates the parasympathetic system, your body's brake pedal. You'll feel it. The shoulders unclench, the pulse settles, The mind follows the body. 3. Interoception. Return to the senses. When you're spiraling mentally, you're usually numb to your physical experience. Bringing attention to internal sensations, heartbeat, stomach tension, feet on the ground, rewires your awareness. This anchors you in now, not conceptually, biologically. These aren't hacks, they're interruptions, micro breaks that snap your brain out of prediction mode and into presence. But here's what's really happening. You're not just calming the noise. You're training your system to recognize that not every tension needs a thought. Not every discomfort is a danger. And that's the foundation for something deeper. The realization that overthinking is often a coping strategy for emotions you haven't processed. Which brings us to a darker layer most people avoid. What if your mind likes overthinking? Not to help you, but to escape something else. That's where we go next. Because the addiction to thought isn't always about fear. Sometimes, it's about comfort. You think you want clarity. But sometimes, what your brain really wants is familiar suffering. That's the hidden layer we rarely talk about. Overthinking isn't just a reaction to stress. It can become a source of comfort. Not because it feels good, but because it feels known, predictable, safe in its own twisted way. Just like a smoker lights a cigarette to deal with anxiety, your mind lights up old thought patterns to avoid silence, stillness, presence. And the reward? A brief, hollow sense of control. B.F. Skinner showed us this in his behavioral work. When a certain action leads to relief, even temporary, it gets reinforced. Over time, that action becomes automatic. Not because it helps, but because it relieves, even if it costs you peace. Now apply that to your inner life. Every time you spiral in thought, you escape the discomfort of the present moment. You shift from feeling to figuring out, from sensation to simulation. And here's the brutal twist. The brain gets addicted to that loop. It learns that thought, no matter how exhausting, is better than stillness, because stillness might bring up grief, or guilt, or a sense of emptiness you're not ready to face. Nietzsche once wrote, "Man would rather will nothingness than not will at all." In other words, we'd rather fill our heads with noise than face the vacuum of emotional honesty. So overthinking becomes your escape, from sadness, from anger, from truth. That's why you keep going back to it. Because stopping would mean feeling, and your system's been trained to fear that more than failure. But here's what's really happening. You're not solving anything. You're sedating yourself with thoughts. Mental busyness becomes your drug, and clarity feels almost unbearable, because it comes with vulnerability, with confronting what's actually here. But here's the shift. Once you see overthinking as an emotional habit, not a sign of intelligence, you regain your power. Because habits can be reconditioned, loops can be broken. And that's where we're going next. Back to your body. Because to heal your mind, you don't need to escape it. You need to feel what it's been trying to avoid. You've spent years trying to fix your mind by thinking harder. But here's what's really happening. Your body has been screaming for your attention, and you've been too busy thinking to hear it. Overthinking isn't just mental noise, it's disembodiment. Every time your thoughts race, your body tightens. Shoulders creep up, stomach clenches, breath becomes shallow. But you don't notice, because you've been trained to leave your body the moment discomfort shows up. The result? You become a mind without a ground, floating, hyper-aware, completely disconnected. And here's the paradox. You don't need to silence your thoughts to feel peace. You need to anchor them, back into sensation, into presence, into your body. Alan Watts once said, "The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive." And here's how it becomes destructive: when it operates without the body. Andrew Huberman confirms this from a neuroscientific lens. Sensory input, like breath, movement, and touch, regulates mental activity. You don't control thought by suppressing it. You regulate it by reconnecting to where you actually are. Let that sink in. You've been trying to escape your mind, when what you really needed was to come back to your body. That's why mindfulness isn't about emptying your mind. It's about filling your body with your own awareness, feeling your feet, scanning your skin, sensing your pulse without judgment, not to escape pain, but to include it. Because here's the brutal truth. Your pain doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be felt, fully, without the distortion of mental filters. And that only happens through the body. You want to stop overthinking? Start by listening to the part of you that's never been intellectualized. The beating heart, the grounded feet, the trembling hands. They carry more truth than any thought ever will. But this isn't just about presence. It's about power, reclaiming the wisdom you've outsourced to thought. In the next chapter, we'll give that wisdom form. A simple, 2-minute daily ritual that grounds your nervous system, rewires your focus, and teaches your brain a new habit: feeling before thinking, moving before spiraling, living before analyzing. Let's get honest. You already know what overthinking feels like. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It sneaks in during the quiet moments, when you're brushing your teeth and your brain suddenly replays that one conversation from 3 weeks ago, when you're driving and your chest tightens because you imagined 5 different futures, and none of them felt safe. When you lie down at night and instead of sleeping, your thoughts build stories that keep your body in a state of quiet panic. And the worst part? You've probably learned to live with it, to normalize the mental noise, to believe this is just how your mind works. But that's not true. This isn't your identity. It's a pattern, and patterns can be interrupted. You don't need a new mindset. You need a daily moment where you choose not to feed the loop. That's what this practice is. Not a ritual, not a life hack. Just a small act of self-respect, done consistently, that tells your brain, we don't live in fear anymore. We live in presence. So here's the 3-step protocol. It takes less than 2 minutes, but it only works if you actually do it, especially when you don't feel like it. Step 1. Break the posture of rumination. Overthinking has a body language. You know it. Slouched spine, shallow breath, gaze locked on nothing. Stand up, roll your shoulders, look at the ceiling. Even just raising your head changes your brain's chemistry. Why? Because posture sends a signal to your nervous system. I'm not under attack. Movement breaks the trance. And in that break, you have a choice. Step 2. Ask the disruptive question. Say this out loud, or in your head with full presence. What am I trying to control right now that I can't? Don't answer it. Let it hit. This isn't about solving. It's about exposing the illusion of control that feeds your anxiety. Overthinking is often a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. And this question shines a light on that mechanism. The step 3, anchored to one sensation. Fully touch your chest, feel your heartbeat, or notice your feet pressing the floor, or take one breath, long and slow, and feel the air moving through your nose. Not to calm down, but to return, because your thoughts live in timelines, but your body, it only lives in now. And that's the real exit from the loop. You stop chasing perfect answers and come back to your lived experience. Here's the truth most people avoid. You don't need to think less. You need to interrupt the moment where thought takes over. Do this once a day. Do it before your mind runs wild. Do it especially when the spiral feels justified. You'll start to feel the difference. Not in hours, in days. Because your nervous system doesn't care about affirmations. It cares about safety, action, consistency. This is how you reclaim your mind. Not with more thinking, but with less resistance to being here. And once you're here, in this body, in this moment, you can finally live from clarity instead of survival. Because even when your mind is quiet, there's still a craving. The need to know, the need to be sure. And that, more than anything, might be the chain that's kept you from real freedom. You've done the breathing. You've interrupted the spiral. You've come back to your body. But even now, in the stillness, a question lingers beneath your ribs. But what if I still don't know what to do? What if you pause the thoughts, reset your nervous system, and the answer still doesn't come? This is the moment most people quietly collapse. Not because they're weak, but because they were sold a lie. That if you stop overthinking, clarity will automatically arrive. It won't. Not always. Sometimes clarity stays silent, and you're left with a strange kind of emptiness. Not fear, not chaos, just uncertainty. But here's what's really happening. That emptiness isn't your enemy. It's your liberation waiting to be accepted. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this in a way few dare to face. He didn't offer answers. He offered a challenge. Live as if the universe has no fixed meaning, and yet love it anyway. He called it amor fati, the love of fate. Not passive acceptance, not surrender, but choosing to live fully, even without guarantees. And that is the true end of overthinking. Not replacing doubt with certainty, but learning to act inside the doubt, to move without all the answers, to trust your steps even when the path is foggy. Because let's be honest, most of what your mind tries to figure out is a distraction from the reality that no amount of thinking can control life. Not who will stay, not what will happen, not what tomorrow will feel like. And that's not a flaw in you. That's the nature of being human. So what do you do with this? You start walking anyway. You let your life be shaped by your values, not your fears. You stop waiting for perfect conditions and start creating direction. You breathe, you act, you feel, even when your mind whispers, "But what if?" Because that whisper doesn't go away. It just gets softer when your soul becomes louder. And one day, without realizing it, you'll notice something. The thoughts are still there, but they don't grip you anymore. They pass like weather. You feel them, and you keep living. And that's the transformation. Not a life without thoughts, but a life where thoughts no longer decide your worth, your future, or your peace. So here's your final reminder. You were never meant to solve life in your head. You were meant to experience it in your body, respond from your heart, and create it with your presence. That doesn't require certainty. It requires courage. And that, you already have. Now breathe and live. Let's pause. Not in a dramatic way, but the kind of pause that happens after something important. Like stepping outside after a storm and realizing the sky is quiet. Not because the world changed, but because you changed the way you move through it. That's what just happened. You didn't just watch a video. You sat through a confrontation with yourself and stayed. And that matters more than you realize. Because this wasn't just about overthinking. It was about the mental habits, emotional loops, and hidden fears that keep you small while making you feel smart. It was about survival strategies that once protected you, but now suffocate you. And slowly, with each chapter, we peeled them back. You saw how your brain doesn't crave peace. It craves certainty. How your nervous system equates stillness with danger. How rumination feels like control but functions like avoidance. You felt the weight of living in the future and dragging the past behind you like armor that no longer fits. And then, we offered you something radical. Not more thought, not more effort, but something quieter and more powerful. Presence, not as a buzzword, as a biological anchor, as an act of reclaiming the moment where your thoughts used to hijack your life. You learned to interrupt the spiral, not through willpower but through physiology, through a 2-minute pattern breaker that reminded you, you don't need to solve everything, you need to return. You felt the discomfort of silence, the discomfort of not having all the answers, and instead of running, you breathed into it. That's not just mindfulness, that's emotional maturity, that's spiritual rebellion, that's healing. And then, we ended where most people never dared to look, the unknown. Where life doesn't give you guarantees, where your mind can't save you, where the only way forward is to move without clarity, and trust that your values will shape your path. That's what Nietzsche offered. Not comfort, but courage. Not certainty, but inner freedom. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you feel it. Not like a breakthrough, more like an exhale you didn't know you were holding. Because now you see it clearly. The overthinking wasn't you. It was a system, a training, a reflex. And systems can be rewritten. Reflexes can be retrained. Lives can be reclaimed. So here's what I need you to understand. With zero fluff, zero hype, your mind will still try to loop. But now, you know the door out. And every time you walk through it, even for a breath, even for a second, you reinforce something deeper than control, self-trust. The kind that says, I don't need to know everything to take the next step. I don't need to fix this moment to live it. I don't need to earn my peace, I can return to it. And that's why this isn't just another video. It's a line in the sand. The moment you stopped living in your thoughts and started living in your truth. So what now? Start small. Do the 2-minute exercise. Pause before spiraling. Feel before thinking. Let your body guide the first few seconds of your day, not your worries. You don't need to fix your entire life. You just need to stop feeding the part of your brain that thinks it can. And if this resonated with you, if you felt understood in a way most content never dares to touch, then stay close. This space is for people like you. People who feel deeply, think intensely, and are done pretending that being mentally busy is the same as being alive. You don't need louder motivation. You need quieter moments of recognition. And if this was one of them, then this is just the beginning. Follow, stay connected, and more than anything else, start walking, even without all the answers.